Hi everyone, David here from daviddumaiaudio.com, and in this video I want to talk to you guys about sound effect sweeteners. We're going to talk about what they are, how you can use them, and I'm also going to show you guys some examples. So let's jump into a project and get started. Alright, so when I think about transient sweeteners, I actually think about them into three categories. I group them in three categories. Number one are transient sweeteners. Number two are pre-transient sweeteners, and number three are post-transient sweeteners. At least that's the way I like to think about them, and I do it this way because probably the ones I use the most, maybe 90% of the times, are the transient sweeteners. So let's look at this first example here, and I'll show you guys how I use transient sweeteners, and then we'll go show some examples of pre and post sweeteners as well. So this is the sound effect here, and it's the sound of an energy ball exploding. So you can have a look at the video. You don't really see it in the video, but it's kind of off to the side. So that's the sound we're going for. Okay, and now what I want to do with you guys is just a listening exercise. So I'm actually going to remove the two sweeteners that I use and see if you can tell the difference. So you will need some decent headphones or studio monitors to have a listen to this. So were you able to hear the difference between the two? Now it might sound a bit, might not sound like much, but it actually makes a pretty big difference to the sound or to the punch and the experience of the sound, especially the transient. So what are transient sweeteners? So transient sweeteners are any kind of sound effects that will sweeten or enhance or add punch or kick to a transient of a sound. And the transient of the sound is, of course, the loudest point or the peak of the sound. So here are two transient sweeteners that I like to use. Number one are sub sweeteners or kicks. So this is one of the effects I used here. And that's just to accentuate the punch, the bass, and the kick of the explosion. So as soon as it explodes, you hear that kick, and it just it's basically meant to add that punch in your chest so that you know when that explosion is happening. So that is the first type of transient sweeteners that I like to use, is a low kick. Another one that I used here is to accentuate the rest of the explosion. It's like this. And this is just to accentuate the high end of the explosion. So it's basically just a sweep down of I don't know if it was a sine wave or some sort of sample, but basically I pitched it down really fast, and that's how I came up with this sound here. It also has a kick and a punch to it, but really it's meant to color that top end of the transient. So if I play these two together, you can hear the kick is really adding that bass, and the other one up here is adding that sparkle to the sound. So putting it all together again. It adds more character to the sound, and of course it just adds that punch whenever that explosion happens. So these kinds of transient sweeteners, I find they're really good for sounds like this, like explosions, gunshots. They just work really well for anything that's really transient heavy, any transient heavy sound effects. All right, so another way that I like to add transient sweeteners is with plugins. So right here I have footsteps. So let's have a listen to this. So they're okay, and they're already kind of bassy, but sometimes I like to add a sub-synth. There's many out there. This is one of them. I know some people also like to use Enforcer by Boom Library, but they kind of do the same similar thing. So if I turn this off, and I'll just A/B it so you guys can have a listen to what it's doing. You will need, again, good headphones or studio monitors because it's just adding sub bass. So hopefully you can hear that it's adding a bit of sub, a bit more presence to the sound. And let's have a listen to this one here, and I'll do the same thing. Yeah, again, so same thing. It's just adding that bass. So this is another way I like to add some transient, a transient sweetener is by adding a sub synth bass. All right, so we just talked about transient sweeteners and how I like to use them. I talked about using kicks, talked about pitching down samples really fast or synths, and also using bass or sub bass plugins to accentuate the punch or the body of a sound effect. And like I said before, that's what I use most of the time when I'm working on sound effects, if I want to accentuate or make it sound a little bit better. All right, now here I want to show you guys a different sweetener. This is what I consider a pre-transient sweetener, what leads into the transient, and usually I use whooshes for this. So let's have a listen to the sound effect, and then I'll remove the whooshes so you guys can have an idea of how big of a difference it can make. So this is the sound. I was going for something magical, so a magic sound effect. And so I'm just going to remove the whooshes and we'll have a listen. And I'll A-B it back and forth so we can have a listen a few times. So obviously you can probably hear how much of a difference it makes. And so that's what I like to use whooshes for, is to lead into a transient. And yeah, so this is basically what I use. So I'm just going to have a listen to what I have here. So just a whoosh like that. Here I have, so I use 3 different whooshes that I have here. So even if I get rid of most of these, I think it'll still make a big difference. Right, you can tell even if I just have one whoosh here that it adds extra I don't know what, extra interest to the sound. It prepares you for that impact for the transient of the sound. So yeah, whooshes for pre-transients. And so yeah, that's how I like to use whooshes as pre-transient sound effects. All right, so we've done transient sweeteners, we've done pre-transient sweeteners, and now for post-transient sweeteners, there's kind of 2 ways I like to think about them. Usually the first is as a low rumble or a sub note, something that will extend the duration of the sound effect. And the other way is to have the same thing but really high pitched, so some sort of ambient sound or a delayed sound that will play on top of the sound effect to, again, stretch it out and to make it last a bit longer. So let's look at the example I have here. I'm using the same magic sound effect that we just were listening to, but I added 2 other post-transient sweeteners here. So this first one here is a low bass growl, sounds like this. So it's really a sub note, really to add that sub and to extend that sound effect. So let's hear it without and then with it. So that is the sound effect. Again, just to extend that value or just to add that interest or to, it really depends on the project you're working with. Usually when I'm thinking about, post-transient sound effects, post-transient sweeteners, I should say, I'm usually incorporating them as part of the actual sound itself or the sound design. So I don't use post-sweeteners too much, but this is how I would use it. And now the other one, a similar idea, but this you're going to hear now is on the higher frequency. It's really playing with the high frequency. So I'm play it without and then with. Right, so just a nice magical touch to it, and I added replica here to add some delay again to extend that sound, and make it a bit more ambient, more interesting, and more magical, I guess. And yeah, so these are the 2 ways that I would think about post transient sweeteners. All right, so that is it for sound effects sweeteners and how I like to use them. Before you guys go, I want to invite you guys to check out my free webinar that I put together, just showing you guys how do I create passive income from selling sound effects online. So if you guys are interested in that, check the link in the description below. Also, I would love to hear about what you guys thought about this video. What do you guys think about, sweeteners? How do you guys use sweeteners? I mean, this is just the way that I like to think about it. I know it's definitely not the only way to think about it. Other people do it differently. So I'm really curious to know how you guys use sweeteners. Do you use sweeteners? If you do, what does it look like? What does it sound like? Yeah, let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer you guys. And I think that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.